All right, so now I want to talk about self-directed learning. And it's become a term, but I've been doing it since I was a kid. So I'm not necessarily ascribing to what the websites say about self-directed learning, just the idea. I think it's a good term, though, for the idea of you directing yourself in your learning. So that's all I mean by self-directed learning. And I want to be able to help you do that through a few different methods. We'll talk a little bit about different ways that you can teach yourself, as well as deliberate practice, which is a pretty cool series of steps that I've seen that looks like a really neat way of going about growing any skills that you need to grow on your way to creating what you want to create. The first thing to do on your way to directing yourself in your learning is something I mentioned before with the creative process with Robert Fritz's creating, the idea of making sure you know what you want to achieve. What is your vision? And this can be both for a particular project, but it can also be for who you want to be when you're done going through this process of learning and growing. Can you see what you want to be able to achieve? Can you tell who you want to be able to emulate? Kind of we talked about inspiration. Do you want to be able to be an expressive musician, or do you want to be an incredible dancer, or do you want to be an incredible actor, or just whatever creative you want to be? Make sure you have that vision in mind. And then also, look at objective reality. Where are you at? What skills do you have right now that you can use, and what skills do you feel like are necessary to get? So it's kind of understanding that tension between current reality and your vision. Once you see that vision, once that vision of what you want to become is clear, and once you really have a good sense of objective reality, you're not judging yourself, you're not beating yourself up about it, you just know what you don't know, or you know that you don't know certain things, you have that sense. The next thing is really to just write out all the different steps and different activities and tasks it would take to move from where you're at in current reality to your goal. And that can be a large list. That's okay. Don't let it intimidate you. You have to start somewhere. A journey of 1,000 steps starts with one. Or 1,000 miles starts with one step. But basically just get to that point where you can see all the different steps. You don't have to worry about the order of those steps yet. I might have mentioned that before, but just getting them down first just lets them out, and then you can worry about what order to get them into. So now you have a list of tasks and exercises and activities that you need to be able to achieve in order to accomplish your final goal. And some of these would probably be pretty obvious which ones you can do sooner than later. And there's also probably some that are obviously things that you need to be able to learn and grow before you can really accomplish your goal. And so isolate those activities or those skills that you need to be able to learn. And then try and see if you can brainstorm around different ways that you can learn those things. Try and think of different exercises. You've got the entire internet and books and all kinds of things that are ready to help you to be able to at least do the research around the kind of direction you want to go. So start to do that. I'll give you some examples of some ways that different people have done some self-directed learning so you can get some ideas in your head about ways to go about it. But ultimately it will be about what you find works for you. One of my favorite stories of somebody who did a lot of self-directed learning comes from the book Talent is Overrated by Jeff Colvin. And he related stories about Benjamin Franklin, the guy on the $100 bill, and who harnessed electricity with a key and a kite in a lightning storm or something like that. But not only was he a major inventor, but he was also a really famous speaker, and he was very good at how to make points and how to communicate. And he did that by leveraging and creating all sorts of different exercises around a publication that inspired him, known as The Spectator. So one of the things that Benjamin Franklin did was he kind of broke down learning how to write articles in different ways, and he had different methodologies and looked at the article from different perspectives in order to learn more about it. The first way he did it was he just kind of summarized the points from any particular article that he was inspired by, and he'd just kind of write his own notes about the article, and then he'd set everything aside for a couple of weeks, and he'd come back to that original set of notes and see if he could recreate a good article based on the notes that he had taken. And then he'd compare the two to see where it was doing well and where it wasn't doing well. So it's very systematic and very isolated to what he wanted to learn around that. Another thing that Benjamin Franklin wanted to learn was he wanted to expand his vocabulary. And so he figured out an exercise that he could do where basically he would take the article from Spectator, again, something that he really enjoyed and was inspired by, and try to rewrite it in verse, like a poem. And that would force him to come up with words that would rhyme with each other, and that would force him to expand his vocabulary. So he would take that article, rewrite it as a poem, and learn about the words from there. And then he went a step further and actually took the poem later and tried to rewrite the poem back into prose, and again, kind of see how he did. So lots of really great ways to kind of leverage what he was enjoying, and at the same time giving himself the discipline to focus on a particular part that he wanted to learn. Not only did Benjamin Franklin, summarize points, put them away, come back later, write an article in verse or poem, and then rewrite it again and rewrite it and look at it again. He even wanted to learn how to organize. So as a third point, he wanted to learn how to organize. He would write points from, again, an article he really enjoyed, and then he'd mix them up. He'd actually either rip them or write different points on different pieces of paper and scramble them up and put them away for a while. And then he'd come back and he'd force himself to have to reorganize the points to be able to make a good argument, and then rewrite another article from that reorganization, and then again compare to the original. So he was constantly giving himself different exercises or different methodologies to learn from different perspectives, and kind of deepen the learning by doing that, by seeing it from multiple perspectives and different angles. He was able to really understand it at a much deeper level than just doing one thing over and over and over again. Another example is golf. I don't know if you've ever golfed, but a lot of people, when they hit the golf ball from the tee, if it goes in the wrong direction or if it goes pretty far off, they'll just hit another one. They'll take a mulligan and try again, and they'll basically wait until they get a good shot before they move forward. I read an article about a coach who basically did the opposite with his students. He'd actually have them hit 3 golf balls from the tee, and then they'd hit from the worst spot that they shot. So they were being forced to literally go off the beaten path and learn how to overcome the challenges of bad shots, and see how to golf from different perspectives, and give themselves those challenges that they wouldn't have otherwise if they had just always hit the good shots. So again, a good example of ways to give yourself different perspective or a different way of learning that isn't traditional, and allows you to kind of deepen your learning by different perspectives. To give you a couple personal examples, if you saw my story, you remember I mentioned the idea of going to a library and checking out a book that was beautiful, all about color, and I had to photocopy it in black and white because I couldn't afford it, and I bought some paints that were much cheaper than the book, and recreated those lessons and learned color from that perspective, and gave myself those kind of challenges just to learn about color as an isolated thing I wanted to learn about art. Another thing I wanted to learn was kind of technique, and how to use different brushes and things like that. And I remembered, back in the day in school, where we would watch Bob Ross, and he was this really gentle. He had this afro, and he'd talk about little trees and mountains. And I was able to find DVDs and be able to learn from him directly, and actually watch those and really understand what he was trying to do instead of putting us to sleep. Another skill I wanted to learn was hand skills. And I remember going to the Creative Circus. There was an amazing teacher, Rob Lawton, who would transform everybody's hand skills. And I didn't get to take his classes, but I saw one of the lessons that he gave, which was he gave a sheet of paper with a large typography of the sentence, "Being good is not good enough," and he had people trace it with tracing paper and be perfect and be super precise. And so I gave myself that exercise a few years later. I gave myself talent is the absence of resistance, but I traced and learned how to move my hand like that. And then I also copied that exactly, and I actually copied 1,000 letters, talent is the absence of resistance. And by the time I was done, it kind of looked like I had some talent. The point wasn't to brag that I have talent. The point is that I gave myself different types of exercises and different ways to learn about art by isolating skills and techniques I wanted to learn, and then going about them systematically. But also, more importantly to me, was that I did things that inspired me. I went from point A to point B to point C, and everything I did was something I enjoyed doing. It wasn't a drudgery. There wasn't something that I was hating while I was doing it. I didn't always like the results. I'm not going to pretend that it was easy, but I I was never bored. I was never like frustrated or angry because I couldn't stand what I was learning. It was always a process of enjoyment and look how cool this is that I get to do this. And that's what I want for you.